actually drew the line over predestination. One of my favorite stories about Bulloch County had to do with predestination. They cut a ridgepole for a church that was going to be erected, a Baptist congregation and minister. And the minister stood on the ridgepole here in Bulloch County and preached a sermon that this tree was ordained by God at the beginning of time, that it was going to be the ridgepole one day of this church. That night, the Methodists sawed it into pieces, which I always thought was a pretty funny story. And another thing about Union Methodist, the very first building was a log building, and they had to abandon it because hogs slept up under it, and the fleas got so bad in it till they couldn't hold church there. And that's why I know it had a puncheon floor, because it was up off the ground. Do y'all know what puncheons are? It's just a split log with the flat side, and they would be round under the bottom, but the flat side would be turned up. And that's what a puncheon is. And although most log cabins were built right on the ground with a dirt floor, a little bit later, when they realized that everything was right, they started putting puncheon floors in. And Union was a puncheon floor church. And they did, I'm not sure, it wasn't very far away that they built the new church, but they didn't let hogs sleep under it anymore.
Here his dad, a Methodist pastor, served for a short period of time in a church, a Methodist church named Flea Hop. That was the nickname, actually. It had another name, but they called it Flea Hop among them.
Well, all of our ancestors had lice. I mean, it was just a way that they knew you were going to die was if there were no lice on your body, because the lice would leave a person before they died. And when Benjamin Franklin was presented at the court of Louis the 14th or Louis the 16th, they were going to make him wear wigs, and he had to rent a wig. And when he got his wig, looked at it, it was crawling with lice. And so he was the first person admitted into the king's court without a wig, because he said he wasn't going to put that lousy thing on his head. And so there's all these engravings of Franklin sitting in the middle of all the French court with no hair, because he was bald on top. And there's a famous picture of a French woman holding a fan over his head, Le Ministère électrique, you know, because he was so famous for having created lightning rods, but he wasn't going to wear a wig because it was just too lousy. And during the American Civil War, our ancestors would they would put lice on a plate and have races between the lice. And I read one of the stories that the guy would always win is because he heated his plate, the louse would run faster. But that's a whole interesting thing. You're talking about primitive Baptists and missionary Baptists. There were several missions from Scriven County into Bulloch County to start the missionary Baptist churches. One was Elmer, one was First Baptist, and one was Macedonia. So those were not primitive Baptist churches. They were missionary Baptists. And the people in Scriven County got so concerned because there were so many primitive Baptists over here. And my friend Smith Banks, his ancestors were at Bethlehem, which was a primitive Baptist church, and they took communion out of a tumbler glass because they wouldn't have a communion service and they had no instrument. And whatever money they took up in the hat was given to the preacher. And most primitive Baptist churches still did that. And even now there's two kinds. There's what they call an old line primitive Baptist, and then there's the more of a Reformed primitive Baptist, which I think most of them here. But you get a little further west, and a lot of the old churches are old line. And when I was first a pharmacist, my partner was excommunicated from an old line primitive church over, I can't remember which county it was in, but her husband had gotten addicted to drugs, and she was going to divorce him. And they said that the woman can't divorce the husband can divorce the wife. And so they put her out of the church, and her family had been there 150 years.
A friend of mine named Sarah Kersey, with her mother, they were originally from right in between Mentor and Steelman, right around Old 46. They were primitive Baptist, well, anyway, back, this was in 36, I think. Had a kind of a circuit type preacher, and he came and he spent the night with the Kerseys, well, the Lansingers. And anyway, the next morning on Sunday, he got up and shaved, and the grandmother threw him out of the house, wouldn't let him preach.
The one thing that the primitives and the missionaries agreed on was you can't dance, because Salome danced for the head of John the Baptist. And they wouldn't allow any of that. Now, you could drink, but not after the temperance movement came. Our ancestors in the 1700s drank, because you didn't drink. If you drank water, you died. So you drank beer and stuff like that. I mean, everything was fermented, but you know, a good way to die would be to drink clean water, because it was just the first people that settled here. One of them, Johann Christoph Bornemann, he settled here in 1751, what's now Scriven County. And he died from drinking clear water, because beavers were in it. They carry a bacterium that can be fatal. And he had been here about 5 years.